Hello, and I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to make a video today about connections among some disparate topics that I feel might not be intuitive for most people, but which have been coming up for me in recent months very strongly. And these are among OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, reverence, by which I mean spiritual worship, a certain diligence of practice, and moderation as a value. So first of all, what is OCD? What is obsessive compulsive disorder? I watched a helpful video online that defined this disorder with 3 traits, all of which need to be present to make a diagnosis. One is intrusive thoughts. Everyone has intrusive thoughts, so these are thoughts that we don't ask for, and they're also repetitious. They need to be obsessive, so they need to be about a certain topic or key few topics again and again. There are typical topics for people with OCD, such as germophobia or health anxiety or cleanliness. So we have these repetitious, obsessive, intrusive thoughts. They need to diminish confidence and increase anxiety. And then where it becomes OCD is we also feel the compulsion to perform some action to assuage that anxiety. So for example, if you have the repetitious and obsessive intrusive thought of my space is not clean, and then you have anxiety because of that thought, and then you need to sweep in to clean the space to allay the anxiety, that is the classical image of OCD. So that's what OCD is. Now, I see a connection between OCD and reverence, and this is just intuitive to me. It comes from my own experiences. It comes from a good friend I have with this condition and my observation of him. It seems to me that people with OCD were very strong spiritual warriors in a previous lifetime. Maybe they were a monk. Maybe they, were in the church, were in the clergy, something like that. They had a life of worship, of practice, where they were often doing prostrations, chants, and they were really seeking for God or for some form of transcendence. And it seems to me that in the current body, the current lifetime, what happens is, for some reason, due to some form of skepticism or over-mentalization or something like that, the person becomes distant from what God is, from the spiritual felt sense, and that quality of performing these habits or these practices that previously brought them close to God, that quality gets reduced and transmuted into the secular plane. So let me give an example. Let's say as a monk in a previous lifetime, you were in the business of waking up at 5 a.m. every day and meditating for several hours, and then eating breakfast at a certain time, and then doing work tasks, and then meditating again, and then more work, and then a meal in the evening, and then at the end there was some sort of a sermon, and you went to bed early and you repeated. And you did this for years, for decades, for an entire life of diligent practice. In the current life, that context is for some reason removed. And so instead you have this sense of a vacuum inside you, something you're searching for, and this need to practice in some way, but not a clear orientation, not a clear direction. So instead it manifests as these neuroses of, like I mentioned, cleaning behaviors, germophobic behaviors, things like that. All of these are efforts to be right in some way, to set things straight. And again, it comes from, in my estimation, this sort of residue, which is actually a beautiful quality to be tapped into, of previous lifetimes of service, of worship. So that is how I see this lineage of spiritual tradition, of often religious practice, manifesting in the neurosis of OCD. Now, I mentioned moderation as well as a third connected topic. I experience OCD tendencies myself. I experience OCD thinking and kind of the invocation of compulsions, the temptation of compulsions, right, from these thoughts. In that whole pattern is actually the kernel of the desire to do things in the exact right way, which is a beautiful spiritual quality, you know? So let's say this is another classic example of OCD. Before leaving the house, I feel the need to check all the locks 3 times because I suddenly doubt that they've been locked, you know? And if I leave, well, someone's going to break into the house, and there's this whole anxious spiraling pattern. That's a neurosis that impedes my life. But in that structure is the shadow of this desire to do things exactly the right amount and in exactly the right way. This kind of observance, this kind of holy way of walking through life where we are listening for a greater truth than ourselves and letting that be our dictation. So for some mundane examples of this that are extremely pleasurable and good for us, we might learn to listen to the quality of the exact right amount of meal to sate my hunger, right? In this country, I'm in America, and in much of the modern world, there's almost an injunction to eat more than we need to demonstrate our wealth, to demonstrate our zeal for life, you know, and we make ourselves sick, literally and figuratively in that way. So what about instead listening for the exact moment when my body clues me in that I've had enough? Or, you know, on a more subtle level, listening for my body's cue of exactly what I want to eat, what would be nourishing for me. And it shifts over the course of our lives and, you know, within seasons and things like this. So what I'm suggesting is that, well, a few things. One, that OCD is this sort of residue of a reverential, of a spiritual life, except in a secular context. And in the secular context, those reverential patterns, behaviors, they lack meaning, and so they become instead neurotic. The beauty of this whole complex is that it gives us this skill, it outlines this skill of the exact right amount, the exact right moment, so that rather than need to do everything according to a schedule, which is more of an OCD method of approaching life, or rather than tracking amounts of, you know, how much I eat or how many times I brush my teeth or things like that, we tap into this felt sense, which is akin to returning to the worshipful, the, in a divine way, obedient approach to life. We tap into this felt sense of exactly what is right for me, exactly what is right for the world in this moment. And we enact that again and again and again. So it is a way of remembering who we truly are and casting off the shell, the prison of a fictitious mirage of who we are. So this is my prayer for people who have diagnosed themselves with this condition or resonate with anything that I shared in this video. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a blessed day. Goodbye.